Château Tanunda. Welcome to our tasting of 2022 Old Vine Series and Terroirs collection. I'm Neville Rowe. I am part of the winemaking team here at the Chateau. This is Jeremy, Ottawa, also part of the winemaking team here at Château Tanunda. Together we are comrades in arms and bring to you the wines that you're tasting today. The aim of today is we've got 6 wines, and many of you will have received a very cute little package of each of these wines with a tiny little tasting bottle with exactly these 6 wines. So if you're with us and tuned in live, or you want to taste this when you're watching this video, you can taste along with us. Open the little bottle, and it's exactly in the same condition as the wines that we're tasting here. So each year we do a launch of our premium series of wines, and that's what we're doing here today. The Chateau is a fantastic Barossa piece of history, 130 years of continual winemaking here, and Jeremy and I are the ones who, along with the Geber family and the rest of the team here, continue the tradition of winemaking at the Chateau. We have a number of 6 wines to work through today. There is Old Vines Semillon. Then we have 2 wines from our Terroirs series, which is sub-regions of the Barossa Valley. Then we've got 2 wines that are made from grapevines that are older than 50 years. And our final wine is a Shiraz that is made from wines that are older than 100 years. So pretty significant vine age is a big part of our vineyard source, and that confers a lot of quality to our wine. I might ask Jeremy just to chime in with a little bit of his background and how he sees vine age affecting our wine quality. Go, Jez.
So I've been making wines in the Barossa for near 20 years.
Yeah.
And over the time and exploring the valley, you really get to see how vines and the wines from those vines evolve over time. They go from being sort of bold and brash like teenagers to moving into, as they get a bit of age, they sort of start settling down, start mellowing out. And then once we're getting into sort of 50 plus, you're getting a real sort of elegance to the wine starting to kick in, and then they just slowly cruise off on into retirement. It's a really beautiful opportunity to look at an evolution of, in this case, a variety over different ages.
Cool. It's interesting, vine age does make a difference to the way the vine performs in the vineyard. Older vines, a little bit more balanced in their growth. They are more consistent from year to year. They probably don't necessarily set the big crops in a softer year, and nor do they have tiny little crops. They have generally low level but more consistent fruit, a low quantity of very high quality fruit. And with Europe just having had a big hot vintage, there's a lot of news and a lot of hubbub coming out of Spain, Italy, and France at the moment, the traditional old countries, about how they have seen old vines perform admirably in a very difficult dry summer, and the older vines seem to have outperformed a lot of the younger vines. So that's just something that we are lucky to have a lot of in Australia, because we've never had phylloxera in South Australia. And all our vines, all of these vines in particular, are planted on their own roots and have been and never had to be pulled out like vast amounts of the European vineyards, Italy, Spain, France, had to be in the late 1800s due to the phylloxera vine louse. So we are lucky, and we're going to get straight into it. I think we can just, first wine is our 150-year-old vines Semillon. So this is actually really old vine material. And it comes from a very special little vineyard. And we have another vineyard coming on stream in the next 2 years, which is celebrating its 150th birthday in 2022. So we will see another vineyard source for this wine. But Jeremy, you know a little bit about this place and this vineyard and this wine. So why don't you give us your thoughts on why it tastes the way it does?
Yeah. So the Semillon, grown in Vinevale, it has this lovely, about 2 foot tall, the vines. So lots of backbreaking work growing these grapes in quite sandy soil. So you're getting a reflective warmth under the canopies and a real even consistency in the ripening. Yeah, the wine it's a very pretty, elegant, textural, vibrant Semillon. It spends a small amount of time in French oak, Burgundian coopered, so a nice sort of level of char to the nose, and it also helps just to lengthen out the palate and dry out the palate. It's yeah, I think it's an exceptional example of Semillon. You know, there's an abundance of citrus. There's grapefruits, lemons. There's a really nice sort of soft lime acid, which lengthens the palate, and a nice subtle textural note that comes from a partial bit of malolactic fermentation.
Yeah, and you know, quite often Semillon as a really young wine is very austere and, you know, sometimes quite neutral. This Semillon, apart from maybe Barossa Semillon, where we have what is sort of colloquially known as the Madeira clone, planted largely, and it's a different looking clone to the Semillon that's grown in that I've seen grown in the Hunter Valley. In particular, it develops a copper tinge to the skins as they start to ripen, and it does have a lot more flavour as a young wine than some of the other Semillon clones, which are much more austere as young wines, and right into that sort of lemon pith and a little bit of that ginger spice and some of that nice limey sort of length. And I think an American reviewer recently said, you know, the hallmark of a quality wine, like the hallmark of this wine's quality is its length of palate and how it lingers and the flavours that you're left with on the palate, and they are in that sort of spiced and citrus spectrum, with a nice little bit of texture, nice little bit of weight to it.
Yeah, I really love the flesh on the palate of this one.
Yeah. So, you know, and that kind of gives it a little bit more substance, and when drinking with food, you know, I think it has a lot more kind of versatility as a food accompaniment, and I just like that texture of the wine just to have a glass full as well. Yeah, lovely. And you know, those old vines which are really quite modest yielding, and it is a pretty unique site. And, you know, I guess you know, the rarity. Do you want to make a comment, Jeremy, about the scarcity of vines at this age?
Yeah, I mean, it's you think, you know, it's a Semillon. These vines were planted over 150 years ago now. So, you know, it's generations and generations of age, families toiling the land, you know, surviving world conflicts. They've seen wars, they've seen economies go up and down and up and down, and this in particular survived the vine pull in the 80s. So there's a lot of history, that it's not just a glass of wine, but it is a history and a length of time that is, you know, far exceeds any of our ages.
Yeah. I think that's a key thing. And one of the things that we love to see in wine, why do people drink wine? Why do they? One of the reasons that they have a passion for finding a wine, and it is often because it reminds them of a place, or it transports them to the place where they first tasted that wine or where that wine comes from. And in some of these really old vines, we see a very strong expression of the sense that they come from, and it is a rare and kind of exciting part of that old vine wines for sure. Okay, moving right along. We're going to look at terroirs. Jeremy, the concept of terroir, monsieur, can you please explain?
Yeah, well, so Terroirs, for us, Eden Valley, Ebenezer, two very different parts of the Barossa. Eden Valley, higher elevation, cooler climate. So you're getting you're in granitic soils, quite sandy soils, very, very hard, low nutrient. And then you're coming out sort of to the other side, the Ebenezer in the northwestern corner of the Barossa Valley. They're sort of more red clays, hard soils in a different light. They're exposed. They're sort of sunburnt soils, and you're getting a very texturally, structurally different wine from those sort of sub-regions.
So yeah, and they are two quite different sub-regions too. Eden Valley is definitely cooler and more moist than Ebenezer, which is among the drier, warmer end of the Barossa Valley floor. There's an interesting thing about Ebenezer in that it's it's probably the most northern end and of the Barossa Valley, and the rainfall decreases as you travel from south to north up the Barossa Valley. And there you would kind of, logic dictates that might be the strongest, most powerful, most kind of highly ripened and supercharged Shiraz from the Barossa Valley. Yet it's not.
No, Ebenezer is a cool area because not cool as in temperature, but
It's
cool as
cool.
in cool. Because it doesn't behave like the rest. It maintains this pretty perfume, a slightly floral, violet character. It is big and it is rich and it is bold, but there's still a prettiness to it.
Absolutely, and I call it a paradox because you kind of expect it to be all, hairy knuckles and big muscles, and there's a lovely elegance to it. But the first wine, wine number 2 that we're going to taste is actually the Eden Valley Terroirs, and this is essentially pretty close to a single vineyard wine, really, and the types of attributes that we see in the wine that make something Eden Valley and speaks of Eden Valley is off those sandy soils and those granitic-based soils. There is a sort of a savouriness to the Shiraz, and there's a minerality to it, if I can use that much abused term in wine, but there is. Jeremy, how do you describe the characters of Eden Valley?
Yeah, it's Eden Valley. It is pretty. It's elegant. The palettes are probably
a lot like me.
A little bit more linear. We're getting to the 100-year-old.
Touche.
But yeah, for me, Eden Valley is a little bit more like the pretty half of the Barossa.
Yep.
There's a nice sort of length and line to the palate. There's more little bits of red fruit, little bits of dark fruit. A really nice sort of herbaceous notes come through. But yeah, it's
I sometimes see a bit of a sort of a peat character, or a little bit in that sort of graphite or black fruited character, black and blue fruits. Less of that sort of plum and ripe fruit character of the Valley Fall.
Yeah, I think for Eden Valley, it lends itself very well to French oaks, tighter grain, the more sort of spiced oak, like Semillon, bit of Burgundian cooperage in there, to get that nice sort of charry note, which it ties in really nicely with the prettiness and helps to sort of even further draw out the palate.
And draw out is exactly, I was just thinking as I was tasting, really has that long line and length to the palate, really gives it quite a fine, long finish. Perhaps the Barossa floor is a little bit more sort of voluptuous and round, whereas Eden Valley a little bit more lean and long.
Yeah, so you'll see that when we jump into the Ebenezer right now.
So yep, Ebenezer, that northwestern corner, for it to be called cool as in groovy, the two vineyards that come out of this Messrs. Schultz and Hoffman. Not too many blokes in the Barossa Valley would say that those guys are cool. Sort of different, but I had Marcus Schultz is a very important grower to us, and he has got a spectacular vineyard, and a good chunk of this fruit comes from his vineyard. And he is a man who is half man, half grapevine. I'm not sure that it's blood or sap in his veins, and he does it by feel a lot. You know, his grape growing is fantastic, and he encourages those vines. You know, he'll get up in the night and go tend the vines based on what the weather's doing. So,
you know, it's and for the chateau, having a family of all these small little growers is, you know, that's a perfect example of it, where there's our growers have a love affair with their vines as much as we have a love affair with the grapes that they grow.
Yeah.
So you see with the Ebenezer, it's bigger, rounder, richer, still pretty. They're a nice sort of floral note on the nose, but more plum spice. So this is where we move into more American oak and some Bordeaux Coopered oak. So American oak, Bordeaux Coopered oak, just a bit more flesh, a bit more textural. They carry with them just a bit more bolder tannin, which sort of sits in lovely with the Ebenezer fruit.
Yeah, it does. And those tannins of the fruit and those oak tannins in the terroir range, we're trying not to have the wines too dominant with oak. You know, it's supposed to be supporting the fruit. And when those Ebenezer kind of tannins come together with that lovely gentle oak, you kind of get this lifting of that plushness, and it gets into that almost kind of ice creamy feel in the mouth.
Yeah,
which is why I like that Ebenezer and why it's been getting some pretty good accolades lately.
Yeah.
Right on. So the clock is ticking. We've got 3 to go. I think we're doing particularly well. Great timing. So now into the 2 50-year-old vines. 50-year-old vines, are they considered by the Barossa Vine Charter? They're not ancient, are they?
Not yet.
They're older than older vines, though.
Yeah.
That means that I'm older than an old vine myself. These vines were planted generally prior to 1970, and so they've not seen quite the same number of world wars as the old vine Semillon, but we are moving up and in vine age, and as they go, that cropping level and the intensity of the fruit increases, the cropping level comes down. And so we've got a 50-year-old vine Cabernet, which is pretty rare. There wasn't a lot of Cabernet planted in Australia at all until, you know, in the 60s and 70s. It really burgeoned after that time, and planting spread. So there isn't very many 50-year-old vine Cabernets. And then we've got the 50-year-old vine Shiraz, of which there's a little bit more in the Barossa Valley available. So Cabernet is a particular passion of mine. It's a variety that I love. I love to make it. It's a difficult grape to grow in some ways. Sometimes it's it's pretty tough, but it's getting the absolute best out of it in the Barossa Valley can be a bit of a challenge. You want it to have reasonably gentle conditions in the Barossa Valley, so that you maintain fruit freshness and the fruit stays, you know, lovely turgid, and you can hang on to that true varietal, typical Cabernet character of black currant and and that lovely fine kind of dark red fruited brambly fruit character. How do you see the 50-year-old vine Cabernet, Jeremy? What do you like about the taste of that?
I think the 50-year-old Cabernet, it's it is Cabernet purity. It's from a vineyard not too far from the chateau, so we spend quite a bit of time sneaking out during the day to go walk the vines, talk to the vines, try and coax them into behaving like Cabernet in a region that Cabernet can tend to be a fickle beast in.
Yep.
And it's it's a vineyard that performs year on year and offers a Cabernet of presence and I guess a style all of its own.
Yep. And and the good thing about it is that there's a concentration to the fruit there. There's a density to the fruit. Sometimes the cooler region Cabernets can have a little bit more density, and Barossa is occasionally overlooked for the sort of power of our Cabernets, and I think that one has got a lot of intensity without it being overt and big and alcoholic and dry. It's got quite a lovely sweet sort of tannin profile to it.
Yeah, very, very beautiful coating tannin, and a real core of red berry fruit that just sort of cruises along the palate.
Yeah. At the same time, it's Barossa, and it's got some of that plush kind of silky structure of Barossa reds, for
Definitely.
sure. Yeah. So moving on, the Shiraz, as I mentioned just before, is these vines are probably actually older than 70 years. There's a couple of key vineyards. This comes from our vineyard. Also in the Vine Vale area, and there's a little Marananga fruit in this as well. So a couple of different soil types here, and that does increase the complexity of the wine. The 50-year-old vines, Shiraz, I think as a style, we agree, is perhaps looking for the 100-year-old vine Shiraz to be supremely refined, very concentrated, but to really be a very well-crafted and sophisticated wine. The 50-year-old is perhaps not quite as sophisticated. It's a few more rough edges. It drops its G's and H's when it's speaking to you. Occasionally.
Well, it's like me. It can see retirement down the line, kicking back, and it's just like, I'm going to sail on through and hope we get to 100.
Your retirement's not coming anytime soon, mate. I need you here. Lovely classical Barossa Shiraz character, isn't it? It's big, full, rich wine, quite strident and quite profound sort of fruit presence. It's no shy, retiring little fella.
No, and I think much like the Terroirs, there's a good level of oak in there, but it's oak that's put in there to support and lift the fruit and really highlight the fruit characters without really interfering with the palate structure and tannins too much.
Chocolatey richness, it's really got a lot of that kind of intense dark chocolate, and into that black fruited. There's a hint of that sort of Christmas cake spice, that cinnamon clove kind of little tone in there, which is
a little bit of French oak sneaking in there.
Yeah, and a nice little complexing note. So really, I think that's a terrific drink, and something with enough muscles on it to really stand up to quite smoky food.
I love how it starts out. Like it's a big explosion of fruit, and then it sort of just tapers off and then just cruises along seamlessly along the palate. It's really quite beautiful.
So I hope you're all tasting those little 50 ml tasting bottles, or the big bottles, if you're tasting the full bottles at home or wherever you're doing this, and that you're seeing what we're seeing. Otherwise, we sound like a couple of mugs. Righto. So getting toward the last wine here, 100-year-old vine Shiraz. So again, probably that means this isn't made from some 150-year-old vines and some 50-year-old vines, so the average is 100. It's made from all the vines are over 100 years. And in fact, all the vines in this are probably well over 100 years, 120 years, I would think would probably be close to where it's at. Jeremy, there's a couple of key vineyards about this that contribute to this. And again, we've got another vineyard that is our vineyard, at lot 100, which is going to be yielding some pretty significant fruit for this as it goes along. Talk to a little bit about what those vineyards look like and how the fruit tastes off the vine.
The vineyards are looking absolutely stunning now. We've got about 1.5 inches of shoot growth.
Green everywhere.
It's green and lush. Once you get to this age, most of the vines have spent a lot of their life without irrigation. So, there can be a hot year, a cool year, their tap roots are going down 2.5 meters in these vineyards. One's on sort of a more alluvial soil, and the other one's sort of sitting in sand. But they both push down these really, really deep roots to be able to build this consistency year on year. So with irrigated vineyards, shallow water level, so just from drippers. So you're only watering the top bit of the surface most of the time. So your roots are at the surface, which in hot years is not ideal. So these old boys and girls, they battle on through, and they've survived many generations to get to this point where we're fortunate enough to be able to play with them. Bunches typically are quite small, very, very small berries, lots of concentration. Sandy soil in Vine Vale is fantastic because while you're getting this very small concentrated berries, there's not a lot of tannin there. So having two vineyards, you're building flesh with one vineyard, and then the other vineyard, which has a bit more tannin, a bit more bulb, and a bit more power, you can balance them out. And putting the two together, you're building this wine of really real complexity.
Yep. And it's an important thing too that you let the fruit do the talking in the wine, and not really dominate it with too much winemaking artifact. So we're not really crushing this fruit very much. It's very hand done. We put this across the sorting table, even though we don't really have much to sort in old vines because they're across the bunch. They have really great consistency. You don't have a few green berries here, there, and everywhere like you might with a younger vineyard. And into ferment a few days of cold maceration before the ferment kicks off. We quite often allow that ferment to sort of kick off under its own steam, so a little bit of wild yeast culture going on there, and then we'll come in with our yeast and just have a very quite a nice cool ferment all the way through. Then basket pressing at the end, and sensitive use of oak barrels so that we're not sort of riding roughshod over the wine.
Yeah, so I think everything we do along the way with this wine, it's about maintaining the purity of site and the purity of place, and same with the 5 wines before. And at this level, we're talking about the vineyard and about the place and about the grapes that are from a certain area, and there's a reason why, I guess, back in the time, people thought it was a
planted them there,
good place to stick them, and it's our privilege to honour that and experience it and highlight what those vineyards can do and what they are.
Awesome, mate. That's a really good wrap up. You've done a good summary there. That's a fantastic place to probably leave off. I think half an hour of listening to myself and probably more entertainingly Jeremy is quite enough. Thank you very much for joining us here at the Chateau. As you can see, and here we're here in Cellar Door, and there's people all around us, and looking into the camera and trying not to carry on like an idiot is pretty hard. I hope you've enjoyed the wines a lot and get a sense of how they taste and where they're from today, and the way that we try and bring them to you. Thanks very much. Enjoy your tasting and look forward to seeing you, hearing your feedback. Bye for now.
Cheers.
Cheers. We got up there.